Good morning, I'm Rose Lee. Today we'll discover new technological advances in medical treatments that address heart defects in infants to innovative cancer treatments in adults and educational opportunities that actually serve your child's best interest and academic needs. When we return. According to the Center for Disease Control, 1 in 10 babies are born too early in the U.S. That's nearly 60,000 premature babies born who have a very low birth weight. In addition, 1 out of 5 have a life-threatening opening in their heart. These newborn babies face a number of health risk factors, and their parents can't even imagine what it would be like watching their baby fight for their life in neonatal intensive care. As Anthony Daly experienced when he and his wife learned baby Tony was born premature with a heart defect and needed urgent treatment. The Dalys met with Dr. Evan Zahn, who implanted the world's first device approved specifically for premature babies. That's smaller than a pea, and it's in baby Tony's heart. Good morning, Anthony and Dr. Zahn.
Good morning.
Doctor, tell us, what is the life-threatening heart defect, PDA, and how many babies are affected each year?
A PDA is really a large vessel sitting just outside of the heart. You can see in this heart model here, this little white vessel that in premature babies can actually be quite large. In fact, can be the largest vessel in their body. And all babies are born with a PDA, but we have ways, our body has ways to genetically sort of engineer closure of that. It turns out that the more premature you're born, the earlier you come out, the less likely that those mechanisms are intact and the more likely that this vessel, this PDA, will stay open. The problem is that it connects the two circulations, which should be separate, and the effect is that the lungs get flooded with too much blood. And these are babies that are very frail, very small, already have immature lungs, and if you imagine adding extra blood or extra water to those lungs, most of them end up on respirators in rather dire straits. Unfortunately, this is fairly common, and the more premature you are, the more common it is. So we estimate in the United States about 12,000 babies a year, somewhere between 10 and 14,000 will experience problems with a PDA each year in the U.S., a significant number.
Are there specific symptoms a baby would have with PDA?
There are a number of effects that this big vessel can have on these tiny babies. The most typical one is what I mentioned, which is sort of flooding of the lungs and breathing problems. But in many cases, little Tony's included, the PDA is stealing blood from organs that really need it, like the brain and the bowel, and putting those organs at risk for significant and permanent damage.
So, Tony, how long after baby Tony was born did you find out he had PDA?
It was relatively quickly. He was born at 26 weeks and 6 days, and I would say within a couple days they realized that the valve had not closed, and they were closely monitoring it to see, as Dr. Zahn said, what other complications could and ultimately did arise from the fact that he did have a PDA.
Doctor, explain the process of this procedure and how this pea-sized device works.
This is a tiny, very soft device that really was designed with these tiny babies in mind. And what we do is we make a pinhole, literally a needle-sized hole in the vein in the leg. And watching on TV, we advance this device up through the chambers of the heart into the PDA itself. And simply by pushing it outside of the delivery catheter, which is just a hollow piece of spaghetti, the device expands and acts like a plug to plug the PDA. One of the beauties of the Abbott Piccolo device, in addition to its tiny size and its softness, is that it's what we call retractable, meaning once you put it in, if it's not absolutely perfect, you can withdraw it, you can reposition it, or you can change it out for a different size. So it really adds a huge margin of safety for doing this in what you can imagine are very tiny, frail babies.
Tony, how did you and your wife deal with baby Tony's treatment, and how did baby Tony do after this heart procedure?
When you're in the NICU and you're at the mercy of the doctors informing you of everything that's happening, and quite frankly, you don't totally understand everything that's going on. it sounds like, as you know, it's heart-wrenching. It's a helpless feeling that I personally had never experienced before, being that Tony was our first child. And then Dr. Zahn, he sounds so humble in talking about the procedure, but really you're talking about our son being 3 pounds and doing a heart procedure. It's just, there's no way to describe the level of angst and helplessness that goes on in your head.
Wow, sounds like your family had an emotional roller coaster.
It is. Each day, some days you hear good news from the doctors, and other days they bring up concerns. And for us, that went on daily for weeks. And then Dr. Zahn came in and implanted the Abbott Piccolo device, and he really changed, it turned a corner for our son. And from then, the outlook was extremely positive, and we saw it in him. We saw the way his body reacted to not having the PDA anymore, and it was life-changing.
So, doctor, what follow-up is needed for babies treated with this device? And when babies grow up into puberty, is there any daily life limitations?
It's actually remarkable. We after the procedure, we follow the babies fairly closely for the first few days while they're in the neonatal intensive care unit, and then we typically see them a few times before they go home. Once they're home, we have a few office visits, but by 6 months of age, if all is well, as it has been in all of the babies, they're actually released from follow-up. This is a lifetime cure, and we don't anticipate anything bad down the road. And most of the babies are turning to look just like little Tony, rambunctious little toddlers who really don't need special follow-up, just routine pediatric care.
Where can our viewers learn more about the treatment of PDA?
There's lots of good information on the web at abbottpiccolo.com that people can go and check out more information.
Thanks to both of you for coming on this morning and sharing treatments for premature babies with heart defects.
Thank you.
Across the country, more and more families are discovering the power of school choice. Behind every successful student is a supportive, knowledgeable parent that guides and informs their child of the best educational options available in their school district. From school open houses to rallies at state capitals, the National School Choice continues to grow. And here to discuss resources parents can use to navigate the many school options from traditional public schools to homeschooling is Andrew Campanella, the president of National School Choice Week. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Andrew, tell us about the importance of educating the public to National School Choice Week and options available in different states celebrating educational reform nationwide.
Absolutely. We have everything from school fairs to open houses, information sessions, big student performances and celebrations. And the goal is to let families know that these different types of schools are out there and available for their kids. It's also a week where schools of all types, regardless of sector, get together and celebrate what makes each of those schools unique, what makes them successful, and gives them a chance to explain to parents why they might want to choose those schools.
So how does the state of Florida compare to other states' educational opportunities?
Well, I am a proud Floridian by choice. I moved to the Panhandle about 6 years ago, and not because of me, but because of great advocates and district leaders and legislators, Florida leads the nation in terms of options and opportunities for families. In Florida, parents can choose a school in any district regardless of where they live, thanks to open enrollment policies. There is a thriving public charter school sector, meaning you have different types of schools that can use innovative curriculum and instructional methods. You have theme-based magnet schools focusing on things like math, science, technology, and the performing arts. There is a full-time, tuition-free, statewide virtual school. There is a private school choice program called Step Up for Students that does a fantastic job helping low-income and working-class families afford private school tuition. And of course, families have the freedom to homeschool. So Florida is on the cutting edge of educational opportunities. The important thing is making sure families know about those choices and that families start looking into their options right now instead of waiting until summer break.
Not to mention the great work our school districts are doing in programs for exceptional student education, that every child deserves educational options.
Absolutely, and I've worked with a lot of those schools throughout Florida and have been totally inspired by the great work that they do.
So where do parents begin to explore the many educational options to suit their child's needs?
The first thing I encourage families to do is ask a simple question of themselves. What matters to my family? What is important to my family? Every child is unique. Every child is different. Every child has things that inspire them. Kids also have challenges. So you want to find an environment that meets the needs of your kids and that will challenge them, motivate them, and inspire them to succeed. That is the first step. After you do that, make a list of schools that might interest you. Go on school tours, ask as many questions as you possibly can, remembering that you are the one doing the interview as the parent. Talk to other parents who send their kids to these schools. Find out the real scoop on how the school treats students and parents. And then talk to your kids again so you can narrow that list down.
And here in Florida, we're not stuck in a zip code.
That's exactly right, especially in Florida. Zip codes don't mean much in terms of education anymore in Florida with so many different school choice options. It is really a new world in terms of opportunity.
All right, Andrew, you stood firm to opponents against school choice, who say school choice takes away funds from traditional public schools. Is it really draining the school funding?
When you look at all the different options out there, a lot of the options we talked about, district schools, charter schools, magnet schools, and online schools, they are all public schools. So what we're seeing is not draining money away from public education, but the creation of new schools that are built and designed for kids and are publicly funded. I think that's a good thing because when we have more variety and diversity within public education and more opportunities for parents to pick tuition-free options for their kids, they're better able to match their kids up to schools where their children will be successful. That is a good thing. I simply don't understand why anybody would oppose the idea of giving families some basic options when it comes to the health, success, and well-being of their children.
So where can our viewers find more information on Parents' Guide to School Choice?
We encourage folks to download a guide to school choice in their state on our website, schoolchoiceweek.com.
All right, thank you, Andrew, for joining us this morning to share about the Parents' Guide to National School Choice Week and the options that are available in education.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
In 1998, we started Archer Disability Foundation to introduce educational reform and advocacy and bring awareness of the disparity high school students who were enrolled in exceptional student educations had experienced. Most ESE students were pushed through the academic program at 18 years old to graduate high school with a special degree. The special degree left the student with no opportunities to continue in higher education or be prepared as they were left to find a job with no job training or social skills. Students who graduated with special degrees fell through the school district cracks and were left with no resources to help them integrate into their community. The Archer Disability Foundation spent years advocating to state, county, and municipal political leaders to identify funding for resources before a special student graduated and was left home 24/7 with no hopes of community inclusion. Exceptional students who transitioned out of the school systems with no employment skills or training resources were ill prepared to gain employment and live independently in their own community. The lack of services was a hardship on working parents and a dead end for students enrolled in exceptional student education or job seekers with special needs who already graduated. Recently, Archer Disability Foundation teamed up with Palm Beach County's TV Channel 20. This was a special day for Channel 20 Studio when they opened their doors to Archer Disability Foundation student mentees and teachers to be introduced to broadcast technology and the tools of the trade in television production.
So red means you're live and it's hot. Green means, hey, it's standing by, ready to go.
Employment is an important part of our identity in our community. It helps us relate with those we know and how we make friends in our community. Employment helps us grow personally in and out of the workplace. Our workplace becomes an extension of who we are in our private life. Employment teaches us social skills to better communicate with coworkers and help us relate to strangers. Paid employment is the framework of our identity as a valuable employee. Employment helps us expand our skills through advances in technology and opportunities that can help our inclusive community grow together. Channel 20 Mentors offered student mentees an overview of the studio and the ins and outs of the methods of putting together a talk show and what typically goes on in front and behind the camera.
What are some of the experiences they had in the last week? Come up with 2-3 questions and just you guys have a conversation and we'll record it inside.
ADF's career exploration events offer hands-on demonstrations that create awareness and understanding of a variety of job opportunities available in each workplace. For 20 years, government and business mentors continue to offer mentees unique hands-on experiences to help job seekers gain employment skills, and ADF coordinates mentoring events with Florida school districts to team up with ADF corporate and community partners, who then host their own unique disability mentoring event. Archer Disability Foundation's core message is everyone has talents and skills with an inherent passion to do something well by working hard. Mentoring opportunities help students and job seekers blossom and ultimately integrate into an all-inclusive workplace. I have witnessed inclusion in our Florida communities for students and job seekers with special abilities. And I have to tell you, it is awesome and enlightening. Student mentees dug deep into their creativity to identify if television production is a suitable future career or job that fuels their interest. We even found a student that really excelled as a teleprompter operator. He was fast and accurate. There were also students who really enjoyed being interviewed on camera or holding the interview on camera, and a young man who loved operating the studio camera. And at the end of the event, we found each student had a little bit of love for television production. Special education programs have come light years since teachers told me my son would be unemployable. The valuable lesson that I learned was don't listen to anyone who tags a student with a disability that they are unemployable. I say dig deep, and you will find something that's our God-given talents to share in the workplace or in our community. Almost 32,000 people in the U.S. will be diagnosed with multiple myeloma this year, resulting in nearly 13,000 deaths. Multiple myeloma is a type of cancer that originates in the bone marrow. Many patients living with this disease often experience multiple relapses. When the cancer returns after a period of remission, recently, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved a new immunotherapy combination to treat certain adults with multiple myeloma. Here to discuss the importance of a new treatment option is Dr. Jens Hillengass, Chief of Myeloma at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Doctor, explain what is multiple myeloma and tell us how this blood cancer begins.
Yeah, multiple myeloma is a disease of so-called plasma cells. They are part of the immune system which is built in the bone marrow. And it is causing several very distinct symptoms. Most of all, it's bone pain because those myeloma cells, they overactivate cells in the bones that cause punched out lesions in the bones called osteolytic lesions. There are holes in the bones, so they can cause fractures and then pain. Another symptom can be anemia, low blood counts, red blood counts, white blood counts, making patients more susceptible to infections and also can make them fatigued and tired. And the third very important symptom is the kidney dysfunction. So if there is anything wrong with urination, that can also be a sign of multiple myeloma. But multiple myeloma is very rare, so not every of the mentioned symptoms should also already lead to the suspicion of multiple myeloma.
So is there specific symptoms that a person with this cancer would experience? And are certain people at more of a risk?
We know that there are so-called precursor stages called monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. It's a long word, but it says basically that those plasma cells already started to do something that they should not do. They produce protein that you can measure in the blood and in the urine, but they don't cause any symptoms yet. But we know that those patients, which is actually are individuals because it's not a disease, it's just a lab finding, they have a risk of about 1% per year to develop the cancer, the multiple myeloma. So we know there are precursors. We don't know where the precursors come from. There have been several connections to toxic agents, like farmers have it more common. Firefighters after 9/11 have a higher risk of multiple myeloma.
For those patients who experience a relapse or are not responding to a treatment, why is that, doctor? Why aren't they responding to the treatment? And what makes this cancer so forceful?
Yeah, that is really unfortunate. We still consider multiple myeloma as an incurable disease, meaning at one point it will come back. It's actually responding in the first lines of treatment, like at the first diagnosis, really the vast majority of patients really respond well to the treatment. But at one point the disease comes back. That's what we call a relapse or a refractoriness, when the disease is not responding to the treatment anymore, as you said. And there are several theories and hypotheses why this is the case. We think that the cancer cells develop further. We kind of kill the ones that are susceptible to the treatment, but the ones that are not to begin with, they survive and they form the kind of the disease when it comes back, the relapse.
Doctor, does this cancer spread throughout the entire body?
Yeah, no, we consider multiple myeloma as a systemic disease. It's in the whole bone marrow because it's part of the immune system, or the cells are immune system cells. They can go basically everywhere, but the bone marrow is the major area where they live because this is where they get their nutrition, where they get their support.
Doctor, recently there was a FDA approval that treats multiple myeloma. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and I have to mention first that we get support from the company who is providing this new treatment, and also I was personal consultant for this company. But still, the treatment is very interesting, very intriguing for us because it's a combination of Amplicity, which is an antibody, and Pomalyst, which is a called immunomodulatory drug, and dexamethasone, which is a steroid. And this is approved for patients who relapsed after a treatment, after our standard initial treatment, and they can get this triplet, and it was shown that this triplet, meaning 3 drugs, is better than Pomalyst and dexamethasone, what we used before. Is better. This triplet is better than the doublet. So we know that this is an improvement, and the very interesting thing is that this treatment engages the patient's own immune system to attack the cancer.
Okay, doctor, thank you for this clinical definition, but can you give us, in layman's terms, how this treatment attacks the bone marrow cancer?
It attacks it by itself, like it's toxic to the cells, that's one. And then there are other immune cells that are the police of the body, and they are engaged, they're kind of drawn to the cancer cells to attack those cancer cells as well. So there are several ways to really kill those cells. And as I mentioned, it's the the disease relapses because it develops resistance. And if we combine different approaches and different ways to attack the cancer cells, that's very good because we see, okay, we can kill different kind of groups of cancer cells.
Are there some clinical benefits as well as safety risks associated with the immunotherapy?
Yeah, the safety risk, as every treatment, unfortunately, there are side effects. For example, because I said that it's an immune treatment, so it can cause infusion-related reactions, that the patient has kind of something like an allergic reaction. It's not very common, but it happens. And it can also lower the function of the immune system because it's not that specific. It can also lower other immune counts, like blood counts. Those are the major side effects. From the benefit standpoint, compared to this doublet, as I mentioned, the triplet gives a longer time until the disease comes back. Unfortunately, it comes back, but the time until it comes back is longer. And also the response rate, the number of patients that respond to the treatment is higher compared to Pomalyst and dexamethasone alone.
What educational and emotional supports are available for patients when they're diagnosed with multiple myeloma?
I think the clinics provide very good websites. We have roswellpark.org. The National Cancer Institute and the American Cancer Society have cancer.gov and cancer.org. They are very good. For Implicity, specifically, there's implicity.com. And so these are good resources to learn more about the disease, to understand more. Of course, you should talk to your doctor because that's our job, to explain to you the disease, the treatment. And this emotional support, usually clinics and doctors have also the option to offer you psycho-oncology professionals, and the doctors themselves, the nurses, the APPs, they are all there for our patients. And what I personally also like very much is patient support groups where you can exchange your experience with other patients because no one else will understand you as well as another patient.
So while the patients are being educated, it's also important to focus on the caregivers and the family members so they too understand what's happening to that patient.
Absolutely. That's also my experience because they have to be there for the patients and they have to suffer through a lot as well. And I think it's very important not to forget. And I have to admit that oftentimes we as doctors, we focus on the patients, which is good, but we oftentimes forget the other caregivers, and they are so important and so essential for the patients. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor, this morning to discuss the new treatment options for some patients with multiple myeloma.
Thank you very much. It was very nice talking to you.
Resourceful parents educate themselves to identify medical and educational options to best serve their child's needs. Take on a proactive approach to explore the many scientific advances in healthcare that continue to benefit heart defects in premature babies to adults with rare cancers. Share with us your success to resolve healthcare and educational options to address your loved one's needs at facebook.com/Rose Lee Show and follow us on Instagram @The Rose Lee Show. And you can watch this episode and many others 24/7 at RoselyArcherShow.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.